Welcome back. First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I would say thank you 1,000 times, but it would take an hour to do it, and honestly, it wouldn't make this video interesting at all. But I would like to thank all of you because we reached the 1,000 subscriber mark, which is a small number in general, but to me is a first step into the right direction of the growth of the channel. So again, thank you to each one of you for your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Second, I need a haircut. I know, it's bad and I have to do something. I promise I will. I promise. Going back to the video, speaking of super wide angles is a topic that needs to be handled with care. When we have a super wide angle lens, what we do usually is get everything in the frame. Everything, because we love it, what we have in front of us, we want to have everything into the frame. But sometimes what makes our pictures better is removing what is not needed to get what we want from the picture. And this is a complex mental mechanism that you learn over time. So I'm not saying we don't need super wide angle lenses, but we need to handle them with care. Specifically, this Laowa 9mm f2.8, it's a lens that got a lot of praise around the globe because, especially for the Fujifilm community, we didn't have that many options in that range, because when this lens was launched, the 8 to 16 was not there. We only had the 10 to 24, which was at zoom, which was not small, and it was f4. So if we wanted to have something wider, portable, and fast, we didn't have that many options. The only one was the Samyang or Rokinon 12mm f2.8, f2, that got a lot of praise as well because it was filling a hole that nobody had filled. Now this one is wider, and but it's not as bright as the 12mm, but at the same time it's smaller and more portable. And that's why this lens is very, very interesting. From a construction standpoint, this lens is 100% metal and glass, and it's tiny. Like, look at this. This is how tiny it is on the X-T4. And for a super wide angle lens to be as tiny as that, it's not easy. I mean, you don't find that many lenses like that. The 12mm f2, it's bigger. All of the Fujifilm wide angles are bigger. This is tiny. It's well built. The lens hood is small as well. This has a drawback. I'm gonna tell you in a minute. And from a construction standpoint, it feels durable, and it's got a very good manual focusing ring. The only thing that I don't like about the manual focusing ring is that it's not as good as the one on the 12mm Samyang, for one specific reason. The distance between the half meter and the infinity is too narrow. That means that if you want to achieve a perfect focus, you need to fiddle a little bit with the manual focus ring, because you don't have that precision that a lens such as the 12mm f2 Samyang or Rokinon gives you. Not saying it's bad, but I'm saying that I would have preferred to have a little bit more precision in the manual focusing ring. Nothing, it's not a showstopper, it's not a deal breaker, but something to keep in mind. On the other hand, it's super easy to focus close because there's enough room for the manual focus ring to allow you a precise focusing when it's close. And its minimum focusing distance is 12 centimeters, so you're basically inside your subject. And this, together with F2.8 and the vignetting that we'll talk about in a bit, can provide you with peculiar images that, if used correctly, gives you an unusual perspective that may add flavor to your picture. The field of view of this lens is a 13.5 millimeters equivalent in full frame, so it's a super wide angle lens. It's a really wide angle lens, and it is a rectilinear wide angle lens, which is even more harder to find around. So this is a great achievement for this specific lens. Uh, Speaking of focal lengths, if you think that the difference between 12 millimeters and 9 millimeters is negligible, you're probably wrong. There's a lot of a difference, and sometimes that makes a difference between getting the shot that you want and not getting that shot. I'm not saying this happens every time, but it's something to keep in mind. Due to the enormous field of view, you need to handle a lens like this with care. There's a couple of things that you need to consider. The first one is perspective distortion. If you have your lens completely leveled, you will not see any perspective distortion let's say on a landscape. But you may find a perspective distortion if your subject is super close to you. Let's just say your face is really close to the lens, that your face is going to be gigantic and it's going to be weird, which is funny at times, but you need to know what you're doing. But let's just say straight lines, when you're leveled, it's fine. But as soon as you move the lens a little bit higher or lower, you will see that the perspective changes dramatically and it may ruin your shot. Again, if you know what you're doing and you know how to use it, it may add some flavor to your picture. But if you don't, it's going to ruin your picture. So a lens like this needs to be handled with care. I keep saying that, but I really mean it. I mean, it's exciting, but you need to think about it. One last thing, I told you that the lens hood is super small. There's a problem with that. Since the lens is small as well, what you tend to do is to hold the lens like this. But this finger over here, well, you need to think about it, because that finger, I found myself several times with that finger sticking inside the picture. So you just need to know that you need to be aware that your finger may get into the picture very easily. This is due to the field of view. From an image quality standpoint, this is a super wide angle lens, and in general, all of these lenses tend to be prone to flare and ghosting. And this lens is no exception. You can see that there's flare issues and ghosting issues. The good thing is that if you move your composition a little bit and you change the angle, you can mitigate it very easily. So it is a problem, but it's something that you can solve with a little bit of thinking behind what you're doing. I also realized that there's little to no purple fringing, and this is a completely manual lens, so there's no electronic to correct it. So it's an optical achievement that we need to praise Laowa for this result. It's not easy on a super wide angle lens like that to have almost no fringing. So thumbs up to Laowa for that. When focusing on the sharpness in the center is very good, starting from F2.8. It's actually quite surprisingly good at 2.8. But that goes, we lose sharpness as we go towards the corners. And this is something you can expect. The corners get better as you stop down, but they never reach the quality of the center itself. On top of that, the corners show a very evident vignetting on F2.8. This goes better as you stop down, but it never goes away, so it's something you have to keep in mind. And in my opinion, the vignetting and the not perfect corners are both a result of the tiny size of the lens. Of course, when you're building a lens that is so tiny, you can't have it perfect on the corners. There gotta be sacrifices somewhere. And I guess the compromise was size against corner quality. In my opinion, it's something that doesn't ruin your pictures, but you need to decide for yourself. Each one of us have different ideas on that. So I'm not telling you it's not there. It is there. In my opinion, it doesn't ruin the pictures, but it's just me. The good thing about this lens is that optically is super well corrected. There's no barrel distortion or minimal barrel distortion, and for a lens like this, which again is manual, so there's no electronic to help, it's a great achievement. One last thing that is worth mentioning is that the lens suffers from what is called field curvature. Now, let's assume this is the lens, the one here, and this is your focal plane. In general, the focal plane should be flat and perpendicular to the lens. What happens with this lens and some other lens is that the focus plane is not necessarily a plane. It's slightly curved toward the edges. That means that if you focus here, there's a risk your corners over here are not in focus. Is this something that ruin your pictures? In my opinion, no, because you can see that and it's visible when you're focusing on a flat surface and super close at the lens set wide open. But how many times you have something like that, and how many times you care about the corners if you're shooting an f2.8 very close? To me, it's not that big of a deal, but it's worth being mentioned. It's worth that you know that you may run into this. The only thing is, if your main focus is on the corner, you just need to make sure that you're focusing on the corner, because that is going to ensure that your subject is in focus. Again, it's not a deal breaker for me, but it's worth being mentioned. When it comes to video, this lens wasn't born for video. It's clearly a photographic lens. But if you know how to use it, if you know its quirks, if you know how to handle a manual focus lens super wide, you can still get something good out of this lens when it comes to video. I used it on a mountain bike race, and I could get, thanks to the XT4 stabilization, I could get very interesting shots with me basically getting inside the bicycles and inside the nose of the person that was recording. And especially if you're using slow motion, this gives you quite an interesting perspective, quite an interesting footage. Of course, you need to know what you're dealing with. You need to know that you need to manual focus. So if you plan on getting very close, you need to focus very close, and you cannot rely on the autofocus. But once you get into the mood, it's not that complicated. And I found out that I can use this lens for video if I need it. Of course, it's not my primary lens, but when I need it, I can count on it. So it's a good thing. When it comes to vlogging, I realized that the lens, together with the stabilization on the X-T4, has some quirks on the extreme corners. You see them; they're wobbly. They're not pleasant to look at. So it shouldn't be a lens that you should use for something like that. And also remember, it's a manual focus lens, so it's quite a pain in the ass to focus on your face perfectly. But if you're willing to use it, and if you're willing to deal with manual focus, as long as you activate the digital image stabilizer together with the IBIS, the majority of the issues go away and the lens becomes usable and actually gives you a very nice perspective. So it's not perfect, but knowing its issues, you can still use it for vlog as well. So in conclusion, what we can say about this lens. This lens, despite not being perfect, and I told you all of what's not perfect with this lens, it's still very interesting. The main advantage in this lens is the size and weight compared to the focal length. It's hard to find something that can compare with this lens. And in my opinion, if you care about size and weight, this lens it's hard to beat. There's nothing that gets even close to this lens. So what this lens can do for you if you're interested in that. Of course, if you're shooting for the maximum image quality, the 8 to 16 or the 10 to 24 are probably better. But mind you that the 8 to 16, you're not able to use filters, or you need to bring very bulky equipment to put filters on in front of it. While this lens, is threaded, so you can use filters on it, whether it's flat filters or the screw-in ones. Of course, it's super wide, so you need to be aware of the potential issues with getting vignetting and all of that. But in general, you can use filter, and I have used it with filters, so that's something that you need to keep in mind. In my opinion, this is a great compromise, and I like this lens. I've been lusting after this lens for a while, but the price, which is brand new, it's way too high in my opinion because it's 550 euros, something like that. Its price pushed me back, but I didn't want to spend that kind of money in a completely manual focus lens. I finally pulled the trigger when I found it used at a decent price. But the price to me is a little bit higher. I hope Laowa brings it back to more normal numbers. But anyways, aside from the price, I find that this lens is a really good compromise for hiking, for portability, and all of that. Of course, if you're interested in this lens, you need to think whether you're ready to use a 100% manual lens or not. Again, I say, in my opinion, it's not a deal breaker, but that's me. Each one of us has different opinion on that. I can only tell you that once you get used to it, for a wide-angle lens, it's not a big deal. You can easily find yourself completely comfortable with shooting it manual focus all the time. So just think about it. And if you want to try one, look at the used market. You may find good deals. Other than that, I guess once you start using it, the only thing is that you need to think that it's manual focus and not rely on the autofocus. This is what we usually do. We usually rely on the autofocus. We see the box on the subject. We just assume it's on focus and we shoot. Well, with a manual focus lens, you need to think about it. But other than that, it's not a big problem. I guess that's it for this lens. I think I told you all of the things that to me are important. So let me just thank you again for 1,000 times. And let me ask you to leave me a thumbs up if you like the video, to subscribe if you want to see more of this in the future. And let me know what you think about the lens in the comments below. As I always say, I would like to have a community that grows where we can talk and help each other. If you have doubts, ask. I'll try to answer to each one of you as soon as I can. I guess that's it. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.